I work the night shift at St. Augustine General, which sounds more impressive than it actually is. During the day, it's just another mid-sized hospital. Busy, loud, constantly moving. But at night, it becomes something else entirely. The halls stretch longer, the lights feel dimmer, and every sound carries just a little too far. Most people assume night shifts in hospitals are quiet. They're not. They're just different. You notice things you wouldn't during the day. Small things. Things that don't quite make sense. I've been working nights for a little over 3 years now. Long enough to get used to the rhythm of it. Long enough that nothing should really surprise me anymore. At least, that's what I used to think. My job isn't glamorous. I'm not a doctor or a nurse. I work patient transport and occasionally help with overnight intake when things get backed up. That means I move patients between departments, take them to imaging, bring them up to rooms, or sometimes just sit with them if they're waiting on something. It also means I spend a lot of time in parts of the hospital most people never see. Basements, back corridors, storage wings that haven't been updated since the early 90s. You learn the layout pretty quickly when you're down there every night. Which hallways connect, which elevators are faster, which doors stick, which lights flicker, and which places you avoid. Not because anything ever officially happens there, just instinct. There's a section on the lower level, 2 floors beneath the main ER, that most staff don't use unless they have to. It connects older surgical room to an imaging wing that's technically still operational, but rarely used. The equipment down there is outdated, and most of the time, patients get routed upstairs instead. Still, sometimes you get sent down there. Usually when things are busy. Usually when someone doesn't want to wait. That's how this started. It was a Tuesday night. I remember that because Tuesdays are usually slow, not empty, but manageable. Enough time to breathe between calls. Around 2:30 a.m., I was sitting at the desk near intake, halfway through a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, and the TV in the corner was playing something muted with subtitles. That's when my radio crackled. Transport needed, lower imaging, 1 patient. I remember frowning because that didn't sound right. Lower imaging almost never got used that late. I picked up the radio. Copy. Where am I picking up from? There was a pause. Then, already down there. That was unusual. Normally, I'd get a room number, or at least a department. Who's the nurse? I asked. Another pause, slightly longer this time. Then the voice came back, flatter. Just head down. They're waiting. I hesitated for a second, thumb resting on the radio button. Something about it felt off, but not enough to question it outright. That happens sometimes on night shift. Miscommunications. People tired, cutting corners, assuming you know more than you do. So I stood up, tossed the rest of my coffee, and headed for the service elevator. The ride down to the lower level takes longer than it should. The elevator is older, slower, and it makes this faint grinding noise halfway through the descent that you get used to ignoring. That night, it felt louder. When the doors opened, the difference hit immediately. Upstairs, even at night, there's always noise. Machines beeping, people talking, footsteps echoing. Down here, it was quiet, not silent, just muted, like the air itself was heavier. The lights in the hallway flickered slightly as I stepped out. Not enough to go dark, just enough to notice. I walked forward, my shoes squeaking faintly against the polished floor. I'd been down here before, but not recently. Still, I remembered the way. left at the first junction, straight past the closed surgical rooms, then right toward imaging. As I moved through the corridor, I noticed something else. The doors. Most of them were shut. That wasn't unusual. But the small windows set into each door, usually dark, weren't. A few of them had lights on inside. Not bright, just enough to show. Something was powered. I slowed slightly, glancing through one of the windows as I passed. The room inside was empty, equipment covered. No movement, but the light was on. I kept walking. By the time I reached the imaging wing, I was already telling myself I was overthinking it. Just another call, just another patient. The double doors at the entrance were already open. That was the second thing that didn't feel right. They're usually closed, even when the wing is in use. I pushed through anyway. The air inside was colder, not dramatically, but enough to notice against my skin. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. The hallway ahead split into 3 smaller corridors, each leading to different rooms. I stepped inside, pulling the doors shut behind me out of habit. The click of the latch echoed louder than it should have. "Transport!" I called again. "Anyone here?" Still nothing. I reached for my radio. "Lower imaging," I said. "I'm here. Not seeing anyone." Static. Then, "They're there." Same voice. Same flat tone. I frowned. "Where, exactly?" No response. Just a faint hiss of static before the channel went dead. I stared at the radio for a second, then clipped it back to my belt. Fine. I'd check the rooms. It wouldn't be the first time someone left a patient unattended while grabbing supplies or talking to another nurse. I turned down the first corridor. The lights here were dimmer, spaced farther apart. Halfway down, I saw it. A room at the end of the hall. Door slightly open, light on inside. I walked toward it slowly, the sound of my footsteps stretching out in front of me. As I got closer, I noticed something else. There was a gurney inside, positioned in the center of the room. Someone was lying on it, completely still. I stopped just outside the doorway. "Hey," I said. "I'm here for transport." No response. I pushed the door open the rest of the way. The hinges creaked softly. The patient was covered up to the chest with a thin hospital blanket, face partially turned away from me. I stepped closer. "Can you hear me?" I asked her. Still nothing. I glanced around the room. No nurse, no chart, no monitor hooked up, nothing. Just the patient. And the gurney. That's when I felt it. That subtle shift. The kind where something in your brain realizes something is wrong before you can explain why. I moved to the side of the bed, reaching down to check the wristband. Because that's standard. You confirm identity before transport. Every time. No exceptions. My fingers brushed against their wrist. Cold. Not just cool. Cold. I froze. And then, slowly, the patient's head turned toward me. For a second, I didn't move. The patient's head turned just enough for me to see their face. Their eyes were open. Not wide. Not panicked. Just open. And looking directly at me. I've seen a lot of patients at night. Some awake. Some disoriented. Some barely conscious. But there's a difference between someone who's awake and someone who feels like they've been watching you before you even realize they were there. This felt like the second one. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm here to take you upstairs." No response. No blink. Nothing. I glanced down at their wrist again, trying to focus on something normal. The wristband was there, but it was turned inward. I gently rotated their arm to read it. Blank. No name. No ID number. just a strip of white plastic with nothing printed on it. I frowned. That didn't happen. Even in the worst-case scenarios, emergency intake, unidentified patients, there's always something. A placeholder name, a code, anything. This was just empty. I felt that same subtle unease crawl a little higher. "All right," I muttered, more to myself than to them. "Let's get you upstairs." Still no reaction. I reached for the side rail and unlocked the wheels on the gurney. The tongue metal clicked loudly in the quiet room. The patient didn't move, didn't react, didn't even seem to breathe. I noticed that then, or rather, I noticed the absence of it. No rise of the chest, no sound. Nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. People breathe shallowly all the time, especially when they're unconscious or heavily medicated. Still, I found myself stepping back for a second, watching, waiting. 1 second, 2, 3. No movement. A thin line of tension pulled tight across my chest. "Okay," I said quietly, like saying it would make it normal. "We're not doing this." I reached for my radio again. "Lower imaging," I said. "I've got the patient, but I need a nurse down here. Something's off." Static. Then the same voice. "You don't need a nurse." I blinked. What? "They're ready for transport." The words came too quickly this time. Too smooth. I tightened my grip on the radio. "There's no chart, no ID, nothing. I'm not moving them until someone—" "They've already been processed," I cut in. "By who?" Silence. Then, "You're delaying." That did it. I felt irritation cut through the unease, sharp and grounding. "No," I said firmly. "I'm following protocol. Send someone down, or I'm bringing them back up to ER intake myself." Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Then, the radio clicked. Dead. I stared at it for a second, jaw tight. "Unbelievable," I muttered. For a moment, I considered just walking out, leaving the patient there and reporting it. That would have been the smart move, the normal move. But something about the situation, it felt incomplete, like walking away wouldn't actually end it. I looked back at the patient, still staring, still, perfectly, still. "Fine," I said under my breath. I grabbed the gurney and started pushing. The wheels rolled smoothly at first, then gave a faint resistance as I guided it out of the room and into the hallway. The overhead lights flickered again as we passed beneath them. I tried not to look directly at the patient as I moved, but it's hard not to. You can feel it when someone is looking at you, and even if they don't move, especially if they don't move. Halfway down the corridor, I made the mistake of glancing down. They were still watching me. Eyes fixed, unblinking. I looked away immediately. "Almost there," I said, mostly just to break the silence. No response. Of course not. I turned the corner toward the main hall. That's when something changed. The air. It felt colder, sharper, and the sound, what little there had been, seemed to drop away entirely. No hum of lights, no distant machinery, nothing. Just the faint roll of the gurney wheels. I slowed slightly. That instinct again. The one that tells you something is wrong before you understand why. I looked ahead. The hallway I'd come through earlier stretched out in front of me, but it didn't look the same. The maitis were dimmer now, and the doors, I stopped. Every door along the corridor was open. All of them. When I came down here, they'd been closed. I was sure of that. Now they stood open just enough to reveal dark interiors. No lights, no movement, just empty rooms. I felt my grip tighten on the gurney. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, that's not—" A sound cut me off. Soft, close, behind me. A shift of fabric. I turned sharply. The patient hadn't moved. Same position, same expression, but something was different. I stepped closer. Slowly, carefully. Their head? It was tilted slightly more toward me than before. I was sure of it. A few degrees. Barely noticeable. But wrong. I swallowed. "No," I said quietly. "No, I would have seen that." I forced myself to look at their chest again. Still no movement, no breathing, nothing. The silence pressed in tighter. Then, a voice. Not from the radio, not from the hallway, from the gurney, low, right in front of me. "You took too long." I froze. Every muscle locked. The voice hadn't come from their mouth. Their lips hadn't moved. I was sure of that. And yet, "You weren't supposed to wait," it said again. Same voice. Flat. Close. I stumbled back a step, my hand slipping from the gurney. "Nope," I said immediately. No. The patient's eyes didn't leave me. "You made it harder." I shook my head, backing up further. "I'm done. I'm calling this in." My hands fumbled for the radio again. Fingers suddenly unsteady. I pressed the button. "Security," I said, voice tight. "I need someone on lower imaging immediately. Now." Static. Then, "Security doesn't come down here." Not the same voice as before. This one was different. Closer. Right next to my ear. I spun around. No one there. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. Doors open. Dark. Silent. My heart was pounding now, loud enough that I could hear it. Behind me, the gurney creaked. I turned back slowly. The patient was sitting up. I hadn't seen them move. 1 second they were lying down. The next, they were upright, head tilted slightly to one side, eyes still locked on me. And now, they were smiling. I didn't think. I just moved. I turned and ran. The sound of my shoes hitting the floor echoed too loudly, too fast, like the hallway was stretching with every step. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if it was still on the gurney, or if it had stood up, or if it was following me, because something told me if I looked, I wouldn't like the answer. The corridor ahead didn't feel right anymore. It was longer. I knew it was longer. The turn to the elevator should have been just a few seconds away, but it wasn't there. The walls felt tighter, the lights dimmer, like the space itself had shifted while I wasn't paying attention. Behind me, I heard it. Not footsteps. Something else. A dragging sound. Slow. Deliberate. I pushed harder, breath coming fast now. "Nope! Nope! Nope!" The turn finally appeared. I nearly slipped as I rounded it, grabbing the wall to steady myself. The service elevator was right there at the end of the hall, exactly where it should be. The doors were closed. I slammed the call button. Nothing. I hit it again. Still nothing. "Come on," I muttered, jabbing it repeatedly. "Come on, come on." The dragging sound was closer now, much closer. I could hear it clearly, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open painfully slow. I rushed inside and hit the button for the main floor, then immediately started pressing the close door button over and over. The doors began to slide shut. Halfway closed. They stopped. Something blocked them. My stomach dropped. A pale hand rested between the doors. Thin. Too thin. The skin stretched tight over the bones. I stared at it. Frozen. The fingers twitched slightly. Then pushed. The doors slid back open. It stood there. Right outside the elevator. Not on the gurney anymore. Standing. Bare feet flat against the floor. Hospital gown hanging loose from its frame. Its head tilted at that same unnatural angle. Still smiling. "You're not supposed to leave," it said. Again, the voice didn't match. Its mouth moved this time, but the sound felt delayed, like it wasn't coming from where it should. I slammed my hand against the close button again. The doors didn't move. "I called security," I said, my voice shaking despite everything. "They'll be here any second?" It tilted its head a little further. "That doesn't work here." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep eye contact, because something told me looking away would be worse. "What do you want?" I asked. The smile widened slightly, not in a human way. Too slow, too controlled. "You already brought me." The words hit wrong, like they didn't mean what they sounded like. "I was told to come down here," I said quickly. "I didn't—" "You answered." It took a step forward. I stepped back instinctively, pressing myself against the back wall of the elevator. "I can send someone else," I said. "I can—" "You don't understand." The tone shifted. Not louder, not angry, just heavier, like something underneath the voice was pushing through. The lights in the elevator flickered. For a split second, everything went darker, and in that instant, it was closer, much closer. The lights snapped back on. It was standing just inside the doorway now. I hadn't seen it move. "You came when I called," it said. "I didn't call. You heard me." The words overlapped slightly, like two voices speaking at once. My chest tightened. The radio. The voice that sent me down here. It hadn't sounded right. I felt a cold realization settle in. "That wasn't dispatch," I said quietly. The smile didn't change. "No." The elevator behind me gave a soft mechanical hum. The doors shuddered, then slowly started to close. This time, nothing stopped them. The gap narrowed between us. For a second, I thought it might let me go, that maybe whatever this was, it couldn't leave this floor. The doors were almost shut, just a narrow slit of space left. And then, its hand shot forward, faster than anything that size should move. The door slammed back open. Hard. The lights flickered violently. It stepped fully into the elevator. The temperature dropped instantly. Cold air pressed against my skin, sharp and unnatural. "There isn't anyone else," it said. The voice was clearer now. Closer, more focused. "Not anymore." My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. "What does that mean?" I asked. It didn't answer. Instead, it reached out. Slowly, deliberately. Its hand hovered inches from my arm. I couldn't move. Not because I was frozen, because something in me was telling me not to. Like touching it would finish something. "Wait," I said quickly. The word came out sharper than I expected. It paused. Just slightly. And in that pause, something clicked. A memory. Small, easy to miss. The radio. The exact words. "They're waiting!" Not a room number, not a name, just waiting. I looked at it, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You needed someone to bring you up," I said. No response. But the smile? It twitched. Barely. "You can't leave on your own," I continued. That's why you called. The silence stretched. Then, you're here now. It moved again. Closer. The hand almost touching my sleeve. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm not staying. The elevator suddenly jolted. Hard. The lights cut out completely. Pitch black. For a second, there was nothing. No light. No sound. No sense of space. Then, breathing. Right in front of me. Slow. Deep. Wrong. I held mine without thinking. The darkness felt thick. Heavy. Like it was pressing in from all sides. Then the voice again. Right against my ear. You already said yes. The light snapped back on, and it was inches from my face. Closer than it should have been possible. Eyes wide, smile gone, expression empty now. Waiting. For something. I didn't think. I shoved it. Hard. It stumbled back, not like a person losing balance, but like something adjusting to the idea of falling. That was enough. The doors were still open. I ran. Past it. Out of the elevator. Back into the hallway. I didn't stop this time. Didn't look back. Didn't think. Just ran. And this time, the hallway didn't stretch. The turn came when it should. The lights were brighter. The doors closed. All of them. I hit the stairwell door and threw it open, taking the steps 2 at a time. Up 1 floor, then another. By the time I burst back into the main level, my lungs were burning and my hands were shaking. The noise hit me immediately. Voices, machines, normal, too normal. I stumbled toward the intake desk, the same one I'd been sitting at earlier. The nurse looked up, startled. Hey, are you okay? I grabbed the edge of the counter, trying to steady my breathing. I started. There's someone down there? She frowned. Where? Lower imaging? I said. A patient, no chart, no ID. She cut me off. Lower imaging is closed. I stared at her. No, No, she said firmly. It's been closed for months. Equipment issues. My stomach dropped. That's not possible, I said. I was just down there. Someone called for transport. She shook her head slowly. We didn't send anyone. The room felt suddenly too bright, too loud. I reached for my radio again. Dispatch, I said. Who sent me to lower imaging? A different voice answered this time. Normal. Clear. We haven't had any transport requests in the last hour. I felt something cold settle deep in my chest. Check again, I said. Around 2:30. A pause. Then, no record. I looked up at the nurse. She was watching me carefully now. Concerned. What did you see? She asked. I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. Because for a second, I couldn't remember. Not clearly. Just fragments. A hallway. A gurney. A face. I blinked. What the hell? I whispered. The details were slipping. Fast. Like trying to hold on to a dream after waking up. The nurse leaned forward slightly. Hey, talk to me. I looked down at my hands, still shaking. But the reason, it was already fading. I started, then stopped again. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure why I'd run upstairs at all. I stood there for a long moment, trying to piece it back together. Something had happened. I knew that. I could feel it in the way my chest was still tight, in the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking. But every time I tried to focus on it, the details slipped inward. Like trying to remember a word that was just on the tip of your tongue. Hey, the nurse said again, softer this time. You're pale. Sit down. I didn't argue. I lowered myself into the chair behind the desk, staring at the floor as I tried to force the memory back into place. Lower imaging, that much stuck. I'd gone down there for a reason, a call, right? I grabbed my radio again, turning it over in my hands like it might give me something. Did this go off? I asked. She frowned. You tell me. I mean earlier, I said. Did you hear anything come through? She shook her head. It's been quiet. Oh, quiet. That word landed wrong, because it hadn't been quiet. Had it? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to reconstruct it. The elevator. The hallway. A patient. There had been a patient. I knew that part. I stood up suddenly, the movement making the nurse flinch slightly. There was someone down there, I said, on a gurney. Her expression shifted, more serious now. Okay. Who? I don't know, I admitted. They didn't have a chart? That's not possible. I know, I snapped, then immediately pulled back. Sorry, I just, something wasn't right. She studied me for a second, then sighed. All right, let's check the system. She turned to the computer, typing quickly. Patient logs, admissions, transfers. I watched the screen as names scrolled past. Dozens of them. Every patient currently in the building. Every intake from the last 12 hours. Nothing unfamiliar. No gaps. No blanks. See? She said gently. Everyone's accounted for. I stared at the screen, because something about that felt worse, not better. They were there, I said quietly. The nurse hesitated, then leaned back slightly. Okay, she said. Let's say you did see someone. What exactly happened? I opened my mouth, and for a second, nothing came out. Not because I didn't want to say it, because I couldn't. The memory was thinning, like it was being pulled apart from the inside. I went down, I said slowly. I found them, and then I stopped. The rest wasn't there anymore. Just a blank space where something should have been. The nurse watched me carefully. And then, I don't know, I whispered. That was the worst part. Not fear, not confusion, just nothing. She glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. Look, she said. Night shifts mess with you, especially when it's slow. Your brain fills in gaps. I shook my head immediately. No, this wasn't that. Okay, she said calmly. Then what was it? I didn't have an answer, because every time I reached for it, it slipped further away, like it didn't want to be remembered. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. Can we just check downstairs? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. All right, I'll come with you. We didn't take the elevator. I didn't want to. Neither of us said that out loud. But when we reached the doors, we both kept walking toward the stairwell. The descent felt normal this time. Just concrete steps, fluorescent lights. Nothing strange, nothing off. When we reached the lower level, the difference was immediate. The hallway looked exactly how it should. Lights steady, doors closed. No flickering, no cold air. Just an empty, quiet corridor. See? The nurse said softly. I didn't answer. I just walked, following the same path I remembered. Left at the junction, past the surgical rooms, toward imaging. The double doors were there, closed. A sign posted across them. Out of service. Authorized personnel only. The nurse gestured toward it. This is what I meant. I stared at the sign. Something about it felt new, like it hadn't been there before, but I couldn't be sure. Go ahead, she said. Open it. I hesitated, then reached out and pushed it. The doors didn't move. Locked. I pushed harder. Nothing. "See?" she said again. I stepped back slowly. My chest felt tight again. But this time, it wasn't panic. It was something else. Something quieter. More controlled. Like the feeling you get when you know something is wrong, but you can't prove it. "We should go back up," she said gently. I nodded, because what else was I supposed to do? We turned and headed back toward the stairs. Halfway down the hall, something made me stop. A sound. Soft. Faint. Behind us. I turned slowly. The nurse noticed. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I just listened. There it was again. A slight metallic click, like a door shifting in its frame. We both looked back toward the imaging doors. They were still closed, still locked, still exactly the same. And yet, I knew that sound hadn't come from anywhere else. "You hear that?" I asked. She shook her head. "Hear what?" I hesitated, then forced a small shake of my own head. "Nothing." We kept walking. Up the stairs, back into the noise and light of the main floor. Normal. Everything felt normal again. Too normal. The rest of the shift passed without anything unusual. No strange calls. No missing a patients. Nothing. By the time my shift ended, it almost felt like I'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. I grabbed my things and headed for the exit. Exhaustion settling in now that the adrenaline had worn off. As I passed the front desk, I glanced at the assignment board out of habit. Room numbers, patient names, standard stuff. My eyes moved across it without really focusing. Until they stopped. There was a new name on the list, at the very bottom. No room number, no details, just a single entry. Blank. I frowned, stepping closer. "That's weird," I muttered. The nurse from earlier looked up. "What?" "That," I said, pointing. She glanced at the board, then looked at me. "There's nothing there." I felt that cold sensation again. Slow, creeping. "Right there," I said. "At the bottom!" She shook her head. "You're not making any sense." I looked back at the board. The name was still there. Or, not a name. Just empty space where something should have been. A line that didn't belong. My chest tightened. "Who added that?" I asked. "No one," she said. "There's nothing there." I stared at it for a few more seconds. Then, I reached out and wrote my name next to it. Just to prove something. Just to mark it. The marker felt heavier than it should have. The ink dragged slightly across the surface. When I finished, I stepped back. "Okay," I said quietly. "Now do you see it?" The nurse looked at the board again, then frowned. When did you sign in?" she asked. I didn't answer, because I was staring at what I'd written. My name was there. But it wasn't next to the blank space anymore. It was on a new line, below it. And the line above was no longer empty. It just didn't have letters, or numbers, or anything I could understand. Just something that felt wrong to look at. I stepped back slowly. The nurse tilted her head. "You all right?" I nodded automatically. "Yeah," I said. "I'm just tired." I grabbed my bag and left. I didn't look back again. But as the doors closed behind me, I heard it. Faint. Crackling through the radio at the desk. A voice. Flat. Familiar. "Transport needed." A pause. Then, "One patient,